My religion is simple. My religion is kindness. So says the Dalai Lama. In the recently released film, Armageddon Time, the great actor Anthony Hopkins plays a grandfather trying to teach his 11-year-old grandson Johnny how to survive an abusive family life and a harsh and bigoted school environment. He gently tells Johnny, "You have to find kindness in the world. You have to be kind." In 2018, our congregation approved a new 5-year vision plan that included a brand new mission statement we hoped would become etched in the hearts and actions of all the members and friends of the congregation. Would you join with me in saying it? The mission of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Fresno is to love inclusively, grow spiritually, serve gratefully, and work for justice. Amar inclusivamente, crecer espiritualmente, servir con gratitud y trabajar por la justicia. The serve gratefully, servir con gratitud wording was included as one of the 4 pillars of the church, because we believe that one way a church sustains itself year by year is by members and friends getting involved in some capacity in the church and in the larger community. We also chose servir con gratitud, serve gratefully, because we wanted to cultivate a culture of grateful service, because that's also one way someone turns this place, being a place they visit, into a place they belong. We wanted to cultivate this grateful service, be it greeting newcomers at the door with a smile, or now also in the chat box, helping set up or clean up after coffee hour out on Alluvial Avenue campus, getting involved in our ministry teams, such as the social justice team, or our team supporting the Afghan family we are currently sponsoring. Serving gratefully can be showing up at a protest wherever you live, sending a letter to the editor of the newspaper wherever it is you live. Also, as Karen reminded us, writing from wherever you live. Get out the vote postcards to people in battleground states. Or just sending a note to someone who's grieving, even though you don't know them because you read the death notice in our Friday newsletter. Our mission statement made it clear. Getting involved and serving gratefully as you are able was an expectation of the church, but also a gift you received from the church. Thank you for serving gratefully, Nico. So that was the groundwork. We set this expectation thinking it is also a gift you receive, and then the pandemic hit. And the notion of serving gratefully was completely upended. And now, 2 years and 7 months after that first lockdown, so many of us are tired, we're worn, we're anxiety-filled, we're just stretched past our capacity. Within this different reality, some of us in the congregation are still finding ways, small and big, to serve gratefully some aspect or program of the church. But the truth is, many of us just don't have the bandwidth to do that, to do anything but try and get through another day. So, on this annual Serve Grateful Sunday, I'd like to offer a different way to think about serving gratefully. I'd like to offer a gentler way about serving gratefully. It echoes the words from the film Armageddon Time, when the loving grandfather says to his hurting 11-year-old grandson, "You have to find kindness in the world. You have to be kind." One of the most important ways that we can serve gratefully within this congregation and in the larger world is to be kind. In 2005, composer David Friedman penned these lyrics. "So many things we can't control, so many hurts that happen every day, so many heartaches that pierce the soul, so much pain that never goes away. How do we make it better? How do we get through? What can we do when there's nothing we can do?" We can be kind. We can take care of one another. We can remember that deep down inside, we all need the same things. And maybe we'll find, if we're there for each other, that together we'll weather whatever tomorrow may bring. We can be kind. That's my answer to the question, how can I serve gratefully when I haven't got the time? Dear ones, we all have the time to be kind. Laurie's grateful service today as worship associate is, I believe, an act of kindness. Tina singing in our band's grateful service this morning is an act of kindness. Joya's grateful service as host and greeter on our virtual campus this Sunday, Joya, that's an act of your kindness. The grateful service of the volunteers on our adult programs team who are planning our upcoming winter-spring classes and workshops, that's an act of kindness. The pledge drive team, which is spread out through the Central Valley, there are people participating in other parts of California, even across the country. That is grateful service. That is kindness. And those who wrote those postcards and letters to the battleground state voters, that is a kindness. But dear ones, and I want you to hear this, even if you don't have the time to do any of those types of things, we each all have the time to be kind. Even the smallest or simplest act of kindness, as Lori pointed out, can serve as a balm for someone's hurting spirit. This past week, I was driving and listening, as I usually do, to NPR. And I heard an episode of My Unsung Hero. It was Washington Post columnist Carolyn Hax. And she shared the kindness she received when she was 34 and living on her own. Carolyn Hax remembers, it was when my mom was sick. My mom died of illness. And anybody who knows anything about that knows it's awful. It's just awful watching someone wither while their mind stays perfectly clear. And so I was struggling, but I was still working. Through the whole thing, I didn't miss even a week of work. But I think I probably lost 20 pounds, and I must have looked haunted or something. But a colleague who wasn't normally in my group of friends, who I didn't work with directly, just started checking in on me, stopping by to say hi, and then every once in a while, just shooting me an email. Sometimes it was just chatty stuff, and sometimes it was, hey, how you doing? There was no angling for professional advantage. There was no romantic interest. It was just a remarkable act of grace. It was just this person who had an idea of what your normal was and was
was able to detect things weren't normal, and maybe the world needed to be a bit kinder to you in that moment. Carolyn Hacks continues, it is such a profound thing that we can do for each other. In general, our hardest times are what make us the most compassionate. And sometimes the hardest times can make us bitter and they can make us angry. But I think having kind people come forward and help you through something difficult will help turn that pain into compassion later.
I think back to those lyrics. How do we make it better? How do we make it through? What can we do when there's nothing we can do? We can be kind. We can take care of each other. I'm going to share one final story. It's one I've shared before, but because I know there's so many folks, so many beautiful folks here who have just been coming in the last few weeks or months, I wanted to share it so that you could hear it. But also because if you've heard it before, it's a really good story. I can say that because it's not mine. It comes from Rabbi Jory Lang, who is a spiritual leader in North Miami. This is a true story once told to her by a member of her congregation. This is the story. 20 years ago, I drove a cab for a living. One early morning, when I responded to a call and arrived at 2:30 a.m., the building was dark except for a single light in a ground floor window. Under these circumstances, many drivers would just honk once or twice, wait a minute, and then drive away. But I'd seen too many impoverished people who depended on taxis as their only means of transportation. Unless the situation smelled of danger, I always went to the door. This passenger might be someone who needs my assistance, I reasoned to myself. So I walked to the door and knocked. Just a minute, answered a frail elderly voice. I could hear something being dragged across the floor. After a long pause, the door opened. A small woman in her 80s stood before me. She was wearing a print dress and a pillbox hat with a veil pinned to it. She looked like somebody out of a 1940s movie. By her side was a small nylon suitcase. "Would you please carry my bag out to the door?" she asked. I took the suitcase to the cab and then returned to assist the woman. She took my arm, and we slowly walked toward the curb. She kept thanking me for my kindness. "It's nothing," I told her. "I just try to treat my passengers the way I would want my mother treated." "Oh, you're such a good boy," she said. When we got in the cab, she gave me the address, then asked, "Could you drive through downtown?" "It's not the shortest way," I answered quickly. "Oh, I don't mind. I'm in no hurry. I'm on my way to a hospice." I looked in my rearview mirror. Her eyes were glistening. "I don't have any family left," she continued. "The doctor says I don't have very long." I quietly reached over and shut off the meter. "What route would you like me to take?" I asked. For the next 2 hours, we drove through the city. She showed me the building where she had once worked as an elevator operator. We drove through the neighborhood where she and her husband lived when they were newlyweds. She had me pull up in front of a furniture warehouse that had once been a ballroom where she had gone dancing as a girl. Sometimes she'd ask me to slow down in front of a particular building or corner and would sit staring into the darkness, saying nothing. As the first hint of sun was creasing the horizon, she suddenly said, "I'm tired. Let's go now." We drove in silence to the address she had given me. It was a low building like a small convalescent home with a driveway that passed under a portico. 2 orderlies came out to the cab as soon as we pulled up. They were solicitous and intent, watching her every move. They must have been expecting her. I opened the trunk and took the small suitcase to the door. The woman was already seated in a wheelchair. "How much do I owe you?" she asked, opening her purse. "Nothing," I said. "You've got to make a living," she answered. "There are other passengers," I responded. Almost without thinking, I bent and gave her a hug. She held onto me tightly. "You gave an old woman a little moment of joy. Thank you." I squeezed her hand, then walked into the dim morning light. Behind me, a door shut. It was the sound of the closing of a life. I didn't pick up any more passengers that shift. I drove aimlessly, lost in thought. For the rest of the day, I could scarcely talk. What if that woman had gotten an angry driver, or one who is impatient to end their shift? What if I had refused to take the run, or just honked once, then driven away? On a quick review of my life, I don't think that I have done anything more important in my entire life. How can we serve gratefully when we haven't got the time? Dear ones, we all have the time to be kind. May it be so. Blessed be. Amen.